A lot of folks in an abusive relationship have had the tables turned on them. You're the narcissist. You're the one who really has the problems here. And it can get very, very confusing at times. So I want to talk to you about 7 ways to consider whether you are the narcissist. Hello, I'm Dr. David Hawkins, Director of the Marriage Recovery Center and the Emotional Abuse Institute. First of all, let's just lay the groundwork. A narcissist is a diagnosis. Well, NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, is a diagnosis, and emotional abuse is a behavior. So we're talking about 2 different things in a way. So whether you are a narcissist, we need to first of all remember, and I've talked a lot about this, that narcissism exists on a spectrum. And so everyone, to a certain extent, exhibits a certain level of self-focus or selfishness. So it depends upon to what extreme or to what extent someone has this self-focus. At its furthest extreme, you know this. I presume you've all explored NPD to a certain extent. The traits of excessive need for admiration, a sense of entitlement, a lack of empathy, an inflated sense of self-importance, preoccupation with fantasies of success, and difficulty accepting criticism and defensiveness. So to whatever extent a person has those qualities, then that would lead us professionals to determine whether that individual may have narcissism, whether they are a narcissist. So point number 1 is just to be familiar with these various traits that I've just listed and be honest with yourself, asking yourself, do I have these traits? Obviously, this takes a certain level of self-reflection and self-honesty. But beyond that, let me jump to point number 2. Point number 2, get honest feedback. Yeah, okay, come on. We need to be able to ask our friends, our family, our colleagues, do they see these traits in us? Now, the problem, however, the caveat here with emotional abuse typically takes place behind closed doors and often takes place only with the mate. So even asking for honest feedback from friends won't necessarily yield this level of self-reflection that I'm recommending. Now, obviously, if you ask friends and family, you're going to get a certain level of feedback, but it may not be helpful feedback because often emotional abuse takes place behind closed doors and only takes place in intimate relationships. So, yeah, there's limitations to getting honest feedback. You can ask yourself that question. I mean, how caring and concerned are you about others in your world? Are you sure they feel cared about? An issue of narcissism is lacking empathy and being overly sensitive to criticism. Ask yourself that question. How open to criticism am I? How willing am I to receive critical feedback? Would my colleagues say to me, oh yeah, when I approach you with a critical concern, you're open, receptive, willing, you listen, you attend? Or would they say, yeah, you're kind of tough to give critical feedback to. You tend to get defensive. You tend to explain away issues and problems. So again, you can hear the theme here. If you are narcissistic, then you are likely on that continuum, you are preoccupied with yourself. And there are people in your world, if you will seek them out, there are people in your world who don't feel fully cared for. So seek out this information with some trepidation. You're going to get some feedback. But boy, oh boy, feedback. That's critically important. All right, that brings us to number 4. 4 is to evaluate your emotional responses. This is so powerful, folks. If we can reflect and discover whether we are overly sensitive to criticism, even if it's constructive? How well do we sit with someone's concerns, whoever that might be? Do we welcome critical feedback? And furthermore, do we struggle at times with critical feedback? Do we struggle with uh, underlying attitudes of superiority, arrogance? Those are also traits of narcissism. So most people would say, no, I don't have any arrogance. But wait a minute. Is anybody in your world telling you that you might have an attitude of superiority and arrogance, better than? Do you strive to be better than? How competitive are you? So these are things to really think about. How humble are you? Do you brag about being humble? Not meant to be funny there, folks. All right, number 5. Notice patterns in your behavior. Notice the patterns. Pay attention. When you're with a group of friends, do you do most of the talking? Do you talk about yourself and your accomplishments? Or are you very gracious, and do you listen to others? Do you try to get them to talk about themselves, and do you take an active interest in whatever they are interested in? Let me see that one again. Do you take an active interest in whatever they are interested in? It may be boring to you, but it excites them. So you do take an interest in them. Do you use others to achieve your goals without regard for their well-being? Ooh, that's called exploitation, folks. Do you exploit others? Or do you care about others because they are to be cared about because they're lovely human beings? Or do you look for what they can do for you? How do you do with vulnerability? Are you able to be vulnerable? Are you able to admit faults without having to maintain an image? There is a trait of narcissism called image management. Got to look good. Got to make sure everybody knows how special I am. Are we willing to be vulnerable and just say, you know what, man, I struggle with this and that, and I struggle with that, and I've had a problem in that area, and I can talk about it. I'm okay with that. All right, point number 6. Assess your level of empathy. Think about it. How much compassion and understanding and care do you show to others? Are you able to fully sit with them? Are you able to fully be with them in all of their pain? Are you able to show compassion and care and be vulnerable with them and allow them to be vulnerable with you? Okay, these are some ways to determine whether you may have some issues with narcissism. And the last point, seek professional insight. Oh, and by the way, if you're not willing to seek professional insight, that's even a red flag. Assuming that you seek professional insight and you spend a number of hours with a trained clinician, they're going to get an impression of your personality. They're going to get an impression, assuming they are well trained in the topic of narcissism and emotional abuse. By the way, I want to underscore that. They would need to be trained in the field of narcissism and emotional abuse. But if they're trained and if they are understanding in it, they're going to get an impression from you. Oh, better yet, they talk to your spouse, perhaps, and gets another impression. Oh, maybe if you've got adult children, maybe they are asked about this question too. All right. I hope this has been helpful. Love to have your feedback. Click on the link to subscribe to future videos, and we've got a client care team ready to take any calls and help you with the path forward. Take care and talk to you again soon.